Annie Costabile alongside Beth Long. We just watched Mount Carmel rout TF South in their week 1 playoff matchup. What did you make of the game? What was your biggest takeaway?
Well, if I'm Coach Lynch and the Caravan, I have got to be happy coming out of this one. This was a really sloppy game. Tons of penalties, like Coach Lynch mentioned after the game, lots of holding calls on the Caravan, and they still shut out a pretty good team, 38-0. We almost had a running clock tonight. It didn't feel like there was that big of a win because there were so many mistakes, and it really was more of a defensive showing for the Caravan. But if I'm a Mount Carmel fan, I'm happy with how tonight went.
Absolutely. Talking about those turnovers, TF South, two fumbles on the kickoff, back to back that led to Caravan touchdowns. How did that affect, do you think, the rest of the game for them? I feel like it really put them in a point where they just couldn't climb. It put them in a hole that they just couldn't climb out of.
And here's the thing: if I'm on TF South's team, like, they did that to themselves. So, number one, they hold Mount Carmel 3 and out to start the game. Mount Carmel punts the ball to you, and you drop it. Mount Carmel jumps on it, scores a touchdown the next play. Not great. Still can come back from it. Kickoff on that touchdown. Drop it, Mount Carmel jumps on it, scores a touchdown 2 plays later. Those are just mistakes that you can't come back from, especially when you're playing a solid team like the Caravan. I do think you take those 2 plays, literally 2 plays out of this game, and we have a 2-score game going into halftime. This could be a very different story. TF South was a pretty talented team, and I do think if you're a TF South fan, you should be pretty excited for the next few years because a lot of those playmakers were younger kids today.
Yeah, a lot of young talent on the field. Mount Carmel, 38-0, but again, we talked about it. They didn't walk away from this game mistake-free. Do you think getting those mistakes out of the way in week 1 against TF South, they got the win, is going to be beneficial for them now moving forward into the second round? They can't make mistakes like they made tonight, so do you think it was important that they got this out of the way?
You've got to think yes, and then I feel like the coin can go either way, right? You can flip it to, I got the mistakes out of my way, I learned my lesson, or you can flip it to, I kind of start to get in the habit of being able to win and to shut out teams while still making these mistakes and throwing 2 picks, because my guys are going to have 3 picks, and that's actually not how it goes against some of these more talented teams. I think we saw something very similar, or I saw something very similar week 2 against Maine South, where the Caravan just couldn't dig out of a hole with turnovers, with penalties, and truly Maine South did not play their best football weeks 2 and weeks 3 this season. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see what Mount Carmel team shows up next week.
Next week, Coach Lynch talked about, whatever team they get is the team they get, but he did mention hoping that it's a Lake Zurich team, just being a former player on the Caravan and also now coaching the team, knowing that that'll be a good matchup, knowing a bit of the rivalry there. So what would you make of that matchup?
I think that Lake Zurich has actually been a bit more of an underdog than they should have been all season. I did have Lake Zurich ranked to start the season. I think that they have the capability to end in the Super 25, depending on how they play through the playoffs, and it would not shock me for that to be a really good game.
Yeah, I agree. Behind us, Simeon's getting ready for their week 1 game. Simeon, as we all know, the number 1 seeded team in 7A. What do we make of their road to the state championship game?
I mean, Mount Carmel has a very favorable road. Simeon has a really, really tough road. 7A in general, I think, is just the most stacked class of all, especially knowing that Simeon was bumped down into 7A to be that number 1 seed. You've got to think they do have an advantage because truly they could be playing 8A ball and they'd still be in the conversation up there with Lincoln Way East and Brother Rice for the top seed in 8A ball. But it's going to be really interesting to see what week 2 and week 3 hold for the Wolverines, because I think those are their key weeks. If they make it through week 2, make it through week 3, I think they win the state title.
Right. We talked about that in our game week episode. If they get past Nazareth, and then I believe Batavia would be their week 3 matchup if Batavia makes it to that point, then at that point they're battle tested. They beat 2 of the best teams in 7A at that point. They're 7A champions. So make sure you tune in to Game Week on Monday at 4:30 p.m. We're going to be breaking down all of the Week 1 playoff action.